Hey, I hit the wrong sound effect there. I did the wrong one, but welcome, folks. Glad to see you. We are back. I'm Dr. Sheldon L. Atkins, host of the Leading Equity Podcast, founder of the Leading Equity Center, and I'm also the host of the Art of Advocacy live stream. We got some special guests today, and we'll bring them on in just a moment. But as always, I always appreciate knowing who's out there. So if you're out there and you're listening, watching, whatever it is that you got going on, feel free to shoot a quick shout out, hello, where you're from, represent. And we'll be getting started in just a moment. We're going to be talking about interrupting racism today, policy audit, and my good friends Alicia, Oglesby, and Rebecca Atkins is here. So we're excited for that. It's going to be a really good conversation. I am just getting back from San Diego last week and had an opportunity to speak at the the Deeper Learning Conference. One of the best conferences I've been to this year. So that was awesome. I'll probably be back next year. And I appreciate the people that I get to meet. You know, one of the things I really do enjoy and love about the work that's happening is, you know, in spite of COVID and everything else that's happening, you know, being able to meet people in person and like folks that I've been connected with virtually for such a long time, and just being able to talk to them and shake hands safely, all that stuff, that is such a great thing for me. So it was really a good time out there. It's sunny as always, really good experience. So again, if you're out there, feel free to shoot out a quick message. Just say hello, say where you're from. If you're educators, tell us what you do. We'll be getting started. Again, we're talking about interrupting racism. So as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and read the bios, just brief bios of our two guests that we have. So Alicia Oglesby is a co-author by night and high school counselor by day. After graduating from Howard University in DC, Alicia pursued school counseling to increase college access and overall wellness in adolescent populations. We also have Rebecca Atkins is here, and she's a central office leader for school counseling in a large southern school district. They are both co-authors of Interrupting Racism, Equity, and Social Justice in School Counseling in 2018. So if you haven't gotten that, make sure that you get yourself a copy of that. That is called Interrupting Racism, Equity, and Social Justice in School Counseling. Okay. Now, I would be remiss if I did not congratulate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Congratulations on that. It has been an ordeal. It's crazy the amount of nays. I was looking at the score, 53-47. Are you kidding me? Like, what more did she have to do? But again, that's a whole. I should do a podcast on that. That's gonna come up. But the thing about it is, I'm just very happy to historic moment today. In spite of all the stuff that she had to deal with, as far as the questions that she was get thrown at her, and just nonsense. We'll just call it nonsense. Speaking of interrupting racism, right? So just the nonsense that's out there, it's crazy. Shout out to Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us from Ocala, Florida. CEO, president of Inglewood Technologies, where we are launching groundbreaking technology that directly addresses social justice and accountability. Shoot me an email, Thomas. I'd love to learn more about what you got going on over there, or see if we can connect somehow and see if there's some sort of collaboration that we can do. LeadingEquityCenter.com. Feel free to shoot me something. I see Popsy is here. Always good to see Popsy as well. All right, we're going to bring on our special guests. So give me a second here, and we're going to get them all set up here. Okay, technology. So without further ado, I hope I hit the right sound effect this time. But Alicia Oglesby is here. It's a little cheesy, but this is what we
cute.
do.
I love it. It's cute.
I'm glad to see the both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Alicia, how you doing?
I'm great. I go on spring break at 3 p.m. tomorrow. So I'm doing great.
Good. What about you, Rebecca?
We just had spring break last week with my family. So we had an epic trip to Costa Rica and it was very fun.
Nice, nice, nice. Well, again, it's always good to talk to the two of you. So I'm glad that you're with me today. Now, I read your bios. You know, that's the official stuff there. But Rebecca, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right. Well, first of all, Alicia is way better at writing bios than me. And every time they read our bios, I'm like, God, I got to get her to help me write mine. Hers is always so much
You do
better.
say that every time.
So I was mostly an elementary counselor and spent 13 years at elementary school. Spent the bulk of my career in an elementary school that had high level of poverty in our students and had very little social work support. So I learned a lot of to wear a lot of different hats, spend a lot of time supporting families and accessing needs that they had, and actually really enjoyed that. And when I changed schools and had a social worker full time at that school, I was a little like, oh, I miss doing some of that. But now I am in central office and I get the pleasure of supporting approximately 225 elementary counselors. And then we have around 500 counselors overall. And so I do have some things I get to do with the middle and high school counselors as well.
You said well over 200 elementary counselors?
Well, we have 119 elementary schools. So we're just big.
Okay, well, good for you, and I'm glad that you're over there, and I'm sure that's good for the district as well. So good stuff. Alicia, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do?
Yeah, sure. So I am currently a high school counselor in Lower Moreland Township, which is a suburb about 15-20 minutes right outside of Philly. And so my district is the exact opposite of Rebecca's. It is a very, very small district, one elementary school, one middle school, and I work at the one high school.
Mm.
So I work with about 210 students, ninth grade through 12th grade. So I work with all grade levels. And also right now the incoming eighth graders or incoming ninth graders who are currently eighth graders, who are also very, very ambitious about high school classes that they want to be taking next year. So, doing all the typical high school counselor things, scheduling and college counseling and academic advising, and definitely a lot of social emotional learning this year, in particular, working with a lot of students who struggle with anxiety and depression and rebuilding friendships after a virtual school year. And so it's very, very busy work.
I can imagine this is a very busy time of year for you. So, shout out to all our counselors out there, and our district level counselors, supervisors, and everybody that's doing this work. Mental health providers. Shout out to everybody. So, thank you for the work that you're doing. So let's get into today's topic because we're going to be discussing interrupting racism. And I kind of want to start. I'm just going to throw this out. So whoever wants to answer this one can feel free to jump in at any point. But what does that mean? Interrupting racism?
Yeah, so I think for me, interrupting racism really means dismantling and breaking apart, interrogating, better understanding systems that primarily work against Black and Brown kids. That's kind of in a nutshell. It's certainly much more complicated than that, as I think practitioners learn and supervisors and directors learn. The system is very complicated. So figuring out ways where we can really investigate and figure out what are all the parts in this educational system, in our institution, that are harmful to Black and Brown students in particular, and then go through all the strides, get the education, the knowledge, the language, the skills to take that apart and then figure out how to rebuild it. It's a very complicated process, and one that I think Rebecca and I are constantly learning how to do and redo. But ultimately, it really is creating better schools for all students, that all students are going to benefit from the work of interrupting racism and creating healthy, uplifting, and affirming school communities. and communities for kids, for children.
Okay. And I think that makes sense. And I appreciate the definition there and for explaining. Now, the title of your book is Interrupting Racism, Equity and Social Justice in School Counseling. I want to throw this to Rebecca. Now that Alicia has kind of defined what does it mean to interrupt racism, what does that look like in a school counseling context?
Well, I think one of my favorite things about being a school counselor is that we get to work with the whole school and to see patterns in the way that our school is structured or the way that we treat students or the policies, procedures, systems, and structures that we have within our school building in a way that I feel like no other role gets to do. Even administrators, that's why they became administrators. They want to lead the building, right? But they often get so mired in the minutia of, I remember one time my principal told me that she was in the middle of an argument between two staff members about pie in the fridge. So, they get really mired in this minutia of running a building that, the bathroom is broken on the second floor, et cetera. So we get to see kind of this big picture. We're not working with students only in our one classroom, and we can notice things. And hopefully we're also hearing from students in a way that other staff members may not be hearing them, because we are able to form a deeper relationship with them, either through individual counseling or groups or whatever. So we have this great opportunity and great onus to interrupt those racist practices that might be embedded in the system that we're in that many people might not even notice.
Okay. So this is I like these answers that I'm getting, because it's leading me to the piece that I was really excited about as far as the policy audit. So once we start to kind of notice these type of things, or maybe I should just throw this out to Alicia. What is it? How does that all relate? Okay, so we talked about interrupting racism. We talked about from a school counseling context, but where does a policy audit fit into this whole piece there?
Yeah, sure. So, and Rebecca does a great job of breaking it down step by step. I kind of am in the weeds of it. So I'm just I share what my everyday experience is as I'm trying to make sure that I'm following the step by step. Because there can be, ways of guiding school counselors through this process of really examining and auditing your policies. So I'll give you a great example. So we are in the midst of scheduling. And so that means that at least at the high school level, the secondary level, high school counselors are working with students on the classes that they want to take next year. So I was working with a Latina student, and we do not have a large representation of Latino students at our school. It's a very small population. And this one student in particular is really interested in STEM. And she wants to take this honors STEM class and was not recommended for it, because the policy is that students have to be recommended by a current teacher. And her current teacher did not recommend her for that class. So that class is pretty much off the table for her. And so she and I had a conversation about it. And usually when sometimes things seem unfair or inequitable or just not okay in the school environment, sometimes we get really fired up. I know I get really fired up trying to figure out what exactly is going on here. I need someone to explain this to me and help me understand how this is or isn't helpful for students. And so then I went through a formal process. And so I pulled data for some of our honors and AP classes to look at the numbers. And so I was able to disaggregate for race, because we keep that data in our system. I was able to disaggregate for gender. I couldn't pull out for zip code, but that was another thing because our district is so small. Most of the students come from the same couple of neighborhoods. So I looked at this data, I went through it. It was very predictable. As you know, many districts struggle with access to rigor, and Rebecca and I have talked about this a lot throughout the years. And so I took this information to the leadership team and I said, hey, I had this conversation with the student that led to me wanting to explore this data a little bit further. And so it's kind of like a step-by-step process. And now we're relooking at the policy and trying to get a sense of how this needs to change, because it's keeping some of our brown kids out of these rigorous classes.
Okay, Rebecca, why don't you add to that as well?
All right. So Alicia gave a great example of how she used data, which is what all of our stakeholders care about. So nobody cares about your feelings. They want to see the data behind what you have to say. So in Alicia's case, the policy is that you need to have a recommendation. In the district where I work, we have what we call open enrollment, where students can register for any course that they're, there is a certain like order. You've got to take the prerequisites or whatever, but there is no recommendation system. That's great, right? That's making some progress in a policy that often prevented students from joining more rigorous courses. But the practice is sometimes, not everywhere, but the practice sometimes is, okay, but the honors or AP teachers might stand up in front of the class and scare the lights out of all the kids about how hard this class is going to be. And then you get a whole bunch of kids dropping, or they have a pre-test that they use to try to push kids out. And so you might have a policy that makes sense, but a practice that isn't supporting the spirit of that policy. So you can do a policy audit both ways. You can do the official policy, but you can also say, okay, let me look at the data, because maybe no one's done it yet in the way that Alicia did. And let's start looking at how this looks like. Let's look at some kids that we feel like could do really well. Are they enrolling in these courses? Is there a barrier that's preventing them? And then going from that perspective, I think is important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Now, I like Sylvia's comment here. In my experience as an administrator, I make the move to change the process immediately. Then I look over data to change policy. That's
we can't
interesting.
do that as counselors. We don't have the power.
We don't have that authority.
So we have to do it the other way.
Yeah.
So okay, and that makes sense. Unfortunately, a lot of administrators are very keen on the data first, like prove to me why we need to look at these policies. And so, collecting that data, I think, is really important. Now, I guess so when I pull the data, and anyone can answer this question, but when I start to pull this data, or first of all, maybe I should even ask, before we pull the data, what kind of things should we be looking for that would make us want to pull the data? Does that make sense? Like what are some of the signs, if you will, that we should maybe do a policy audit?
Well, I can share just, every different school communities are going to contextualize this differently, right? Because my school community is very, very specific to the neighborhoods that surround it. So, the school where I work now is very, very different from the high school that I attended. It's very, very different from the K-8 school that I attended. Because in those, in public school districts, you're generally pulling from the community around you, unless you have policies and procedures where you're pulling from many different types of neighborhoods. So my context, at least in terms of racial demographics, is we have about half of our student population is white, a quarter identifies as Asian, and then the other quarter, I would say, is maybe half Latino, half Black. So it's about half of our school population, people of color, and the other half are white students. So proportionally, I'm thinking about how many students, if we have a true and proper representation in all levels of courses, about how many students should be in our honors level courses, how many students from different racial backgrounds should be in other types of STEM courses and art courses, if it's a true representation of our school population. So knowing that, and then looking through my students' the roster for that particular class, I could see, and I know most of these students, and I could see for the different sections that there were no people of color at all in those classes. And so for our context, right, that's unusual, or that shouldn't be the case, because, if we're saying that, you know, all students are capable, then that shouldn't be the case. So immediately red flags. And so, you know, that is what led me to start pulling more data for the rest of those classes and doing some comparisons there, and then taking that to the leadership team.
So just so I'm clear on what I thought I heard, sound like I heard demographics about 50-50, right?
Yes.
White students and students of color.
Yes.
But then the honors courses, there was no representation of students of color at all.
Not at all.
Okay. Rebecca, did you want to chime in?
I would only add that I think sometimes the way you know that you need to look at the data is just by listening to the kids and their parents and what their experiences are, because sometimes that will tell you more information about why that's happening. In this case, we strongly think it's probably due to that teacher recommendation, but without the teacher recommendation, it may have something to do with welcome someone feels in that room, in that space, or how, you know, included they actually feel once they're in the space. And some students may be electing, they might have the rec and then not do it because they're just like, I clearly am not like welcome there, and be like in a protective way for themselves. So I think having that voice from parents and students is so important too.
So then let me ask you this, Rebecca, should that policy be done away with? The whole idea of the recommendation, should that go away? Or do we need to talk about maybe implicit bias with our teachers? Like, what do you think would be the solution when we're doing, okay, I did my policy audit, looked at the data, I see that there's needs to be something that needs to change. What needs to change?
I mean, if you're asking me about my personal vote, I'd take away the teacher rec.
Yeah.
Because the counselor, when they're meeting with the student, if the student is like failing all their courses and they decide, I really feel like I can do AP, whatever, the counselor could have a conversation of, are you sure that's what you want to do? You're failing every single class you're in. But, you know, if that's not going to happen most of the time, kids like know that what they can do and not do. And so I think really the emphasis needs to be on encouraging kids to do more, and the kids that are struggling, supporting them to maybe get to that point. So that would be my preference. I don't know what Alicia would vote. She's the actual high school counselor.
What do you think, Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually surprised when I first realized that this is really primarily the only point of entry into some of these classes. That was shocking to me, and I shared that with my team. But you know, when folks are in their school communities for a really long time, sometimes they don't necessarily see it from the outside looking in. And I've been at a couple of different schools at this point, and that is the first time that it has been such a stringent policy for access. And so I would also love to do away with the recommendation. I think the students' grades themselves sort of recommend them into different types of courses. And it's certainly a conversation that we have with every student anyway, when we're building out these schedules, just as I was speaking with this particular student. So I would love to do away with that policy. I don't foresee that happening this school year, but I do see the baby steps leading up to policies that are a little bit more inclusive.
There's no waiver system?
There is a waiver system, but by the time the waiver system is enacted, we've already created the sections. There's no space.
Okay.
Look at that.
Look at that.
There's some really good comments coming in, by the way. Sylvia says, I found that honors GT and AP courses have most bias policies in school. And I, as a former special ed person, director, as a person who was, trying to work on, we were looking at getting a gifted and talented program started as well at my school. These programs are gatekeeper programs. And so I agree with the two of you, and man, there's some good comments coming in. Shout out to Dr. Jabbers here. Here's the thing. I like to get away. Like, I think we should get away from the gatekeeper process, teachers required, because we see like a lot of teachers will put their favorite students, hey, favorite student, or hey, straight A student, you pass all my tests, so I'd love for you to join. I'm teaching this honors course. You should join. I see that happening, right? However, this is the other thing I want to add to. So I say get away with it, but then I also see a lot of our kids aren't educated or even encouraged to, or know about, or families know about these courses that are even offered and the benefits to these courses. So not only I think should we get away from the required, I need to be recommended, someone needs to write this or fill out a form in order for me to enroll in these courses, but also we need to make sure we're educating families about these courses that are available and why they should be available. Alicia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love being transparent and really working with families so that they are a part of the process, that they are a part of the conversation, so that they have the information that they need. Usually when I work, I would say 9.5 times out of 10, when I'm working with parents, they are incredibly reasonable and just really want what's best for their kids. And they know a lot of times what happens within the school walls stays within the school walls, right? And the decisions that we make and who contributes to those decisions. But when working with families, I really try to be as transparent as possible to make sure that they trust that we are also really trying to make good decisions alongside and on behalf of their students. So when we explain, some of the details of certain classes and concerns we might have with students in one particular area or another, most of our families, they get it. They just haven't, no one from the school has ever really explained things, how it works on the inside. If you're an educator, you get the acronyms, right? You know all the acronyms, you know who to talk to if this doesn't work or that doesn't work, because this is our world. But a lot of families, if they're not educators, it's not their world. And so just sort of opening a window so that they can kind of, just take a peek in and see the work that we're doing and why we're doing the work in this way, I think is really, really helpful for building those relationships and developing that trust.
Thank you. Rebecca, did you want to add to it?
We have some schools in our district who've done some amazing things to really open up that window into honors and AP coursework. Student panels that have students of color, assigning students mentors at their first honors or AP course, like another student who's older than them or more experienced, I guess, in that coursework. Maybe they're both the same grade, but I think anything that we can do I don't think they're going to go away. I saw someone say in the comments that, I get it. It's an issue. And if you've listened to things like Nice White Parents podcasts and things like that, the history of AIG certainly is very embedded in racism and trying to attract white parents to schools. Me, Rebecca Atkins, I probably am not going to be able to change that, but I can interrupt it by empowering my students and my families to know what their choices are and to help them to make the best choice for them.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you, the two of you. Now, here we're gonna change subjects just a little bit, not in a big way. We're just gonna shift because here's the other thing. All right, we talked about honors courses, we talked about gifted and talented and those kind of things that are, like I said, gatekeepers. When we're addressing counseling and the profession of counseling, and like Alicia, you mentioned, like right now you're doing scheduling right now, and then you're probably helping kids with scholarships and applying to college, all these different things, right? All this is happening as part of your duty.
Yep.
I've seen, or at least heard, of worked with school counselors in schools that, they only push college to certain groups of students, and they'll push like enter straight into the workforce, or you need to join a trade. I see a lot of counselors predestining our students with what they should do after they go into high school. What type of message would you provide to your fellow colleagues that are probably in high school, maybe middle school or whatever? Because I think we can start instilling a lot of these ideas about careers early on.
Oh, absolutely.
What kind of message would you provide to in that context?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, and I think, on social media, there's always these stories, right, about my school counselor or my counselor, told me that I couldn't get into. We literally heard those stories from the newly elected Supreme Court justice, right, about how certain counselors or advisors told other people, that this particular school is out of reach, or maybe not a doctor is in your future. Maybe you could be, something else that the student is not naming. And so I think, it's really important for school counselors to know their boundaries, and to also um, affirm and uplift the ideas of their students. And I think ultimately, most school counselors, that is their goal and that is their intention. I think we have to be careful about the language that we use with students and children. I think we have to be really mindful and aware of our bias and the ways in which we perceive different groups of people. I think some people don't work on themselves regularly and have a very clear idea of what their prejudices are. And I think that sometimes can expose itself and sort of, just kind of surface when people don't expect it. And so I think that's part of the reason why I'm such a champion for self-awareness, and that as school counselors, working with students and working with so many people, so many children each year, we really have to be aware of ourselves and aware of the things that we believe about groups of people, because it comes out in our work and it shows up in our work. And we really need to be encouraging students and figuring out, okay, if that's what you want to be when you grow up, if that's the college that you hope to attend, what steps are we taking to help get you there? Even if we see it's a long, long road, that's okay. That's okay. We figure out ways to help students get it, and life will happen, and they will either reach, achieve that goal or not. And we're there to support them through that.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. And that was an awesome answer, by the way. And I love how you talk about the self-work. That's unfortunately it's implicit bias, right? It's unconscious thoughts, right? We best intentioned counselors out there, but the implicit bias kicks in. And just like you, I encourage all of our, anybody, no matter what position or role you have, I think it's important to do some work, some self-awareness, implicit association test, look into the book bias, is it Everhart, I believe, look into blind spot. I mean, there's some really good books out there that you can, just kind of check your own biases. And I think that's important, but unfortunately, a lot of people say, well, I treat all my kids the same. I love all my students just the same.
If you do, that's not really doing your job very well, because
right,
different
because
things.
They're not the same, right?
Yes,
I have different needs than Rebecca. She has different needs than I do. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Alicia wrote an awesome chapter in our book about personal reflection, and thinking through what you bring to the table. And that's important for everyone, but I think it's doubly important for counselors, because that's part of the counselor-client relationship and something that counselors need to spend a lot of time on, even just to follow our ethical guidelines.
Yep, that's right.
And I love what Christina says, intention versus impact. Good. I like the quotes. Good counselors need to check themselves in order to improve our profession. That's a good answer.
That's right.
Now, Rebecca, I want to ask you this because you work with elementary counselors. How early do you encourage your counselors to start talking about careers and kind of encouraging kids at that level to, or let me rephrase it. How do you coach or direct those counselors with talking or having those conversations with students?
I think that in elementary, it's a lot about exposure and thinking through your actual students and what you think their exposure to different types of careers are. In the school that I spent the most of my time in, most of my students would likely have been first gen students. And so one of the things I always made sure to do, and people skip over this part, but I really think it's important. If your parents didn't go to college, you don't hear stories about college, like just any, like, not about why it's so important to get a job, because it is, but like, do you really care about that when you're 10 or 12? But the fun stories. So I used to tell my kids, like, you live in a place called a dorm. It's like an apartment building with all your friends, and you can stay up as late as you want, and you can eat food in the middle of the night, and it's so much fun. Like, no one tells them that if they don't have time spent around other people who went to college. I talk about my own personal experience about like finding ways to pay for college when that's something that might be hard for your family to do. I talked about playing. I don't play sports, but I'm sure people do. How fun it is to play either on the college team or intramurals or things like that, and kind of paint the picture of more than you should do this to get a job when you grow up. Because I think that's something that they miss out on. And elementary school is a really great time to tell those fun stories and talk about different types of jobs. And if your school is a population that you think most of the kids have grown up around parents who went to college, also talking to them about all their myriad of choices, because like we sometimes go way the other way and just assume college is the best choice for everyone. Our plumber has a beach house and a mountain house. So there are other jobs that can be really successful for people that maybe just aren't interested in college. And we sometimes jump over that part. So I think that for elementary, the biggest thing is just exposure, exposure, exposure. What are jobs? Why are jobs important? Basically, everyone has one. I mean, I guess there's a few exceptions to that, but showing them kind of the whole breadth of options so that as they get older and they get kind of more specific information at the middle and high school level, they have some background knowledge that they can connect to.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great answer. And I think, as a storyteller myself, I love the idea of encouraging and exciting kids about, this could be really fun. Wouldn't you like to do this? And wouldn't you like to do that? When I work with teachers, I encourage them, like, when you're reading those books to the kids, talk to the students about what is the profession of the parents or the guardians. What type of jobs, look how this person is dressed. What do you think that they might be doing as far as professional careers? And like having those kind of conversations early on, I think is really important. Now we're going to start wrapping things up, folks. So if you have a question, if you have something that you want to pitch to either Alicia or Rebecca, feel free to kind of get those ready. You can actually start popping those in right now, and we'll bring those up on the screen so that you can ask those questions. But we're going to start. I have one final question that I have, and then we'll just give you an opportunity to give your final thoughts. But when it comes to the policy audits, when it comes to interrupting racism, what role would you say that our school counselors have when it comes to this? Because a lot of times, I think it was kind of mentioned earlier that there's a certain level of power or policy changes that is afforded to mainly your school leaders, right? Your building administrators or your district leaders. So what role does a school counselor play when it comes to interrupting racism?
Yeah, so I would say we have a number of roles, but the primary roles that I can think of, or at least that I identify with each day, one of those roles is exactly as Rebecca mentioned, really empowering students. I'm going to be a school counselor maybe for another 10, 15, 10-ish years. We'll see.
Expiration date on that, girl.
Yeah.
I know. So, I can only do so much in that amount of time, but empowering students and educating students and working alongside students so that they know that disrupting systems that don't work is part of what they can just do as a person, as a human being, as a student, as a future professional. I think that is just exponential impact. And so that's huge for me. I love working with students who recognize or feel that something is not fair and they want to do something about it. I've had students talk to school boards before about what they think is not fair. And so I think that's a huge role that school counselors have, to empower that and work with students around that. And then also to raise awareness, to bring these stories, to bring these experiences to those leadership tables. I get to sit with the principal and the assistant principals every single week, and they have to hear my voice because I'm a part of those meetings. And so I'm raising awareness about the things that I'm hearing from students, from teachers, from families. And sometimes we do something about it and sometimes we don't. But that's certainly my role, is to keep being that squeaky wheel that we often always talk about. So that's what I think.
Nice. Yeah, you have anything to add, Rebecca?
I feel like that was such a great answer. I don't know that I have anything to add, but I do want to give a shout out to all the people that are commenting that we know. Like, thank you everyone for being here. But I've seen all these names pop out. I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? And feeling like I want to talk to them. And so I just have to say hi, y'all.
Nice. Well, yeah, it's always good to have that support as well. Thank you, folks that have put in comments, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in as well. We're gonna wrap things up. Rebecca and Alicia, I definitely consider the two of you as providing a voice in leading equity. Rebecca, I want to start with you. I'd love for you to share some of your final thoughts.
I think my final thoughts are just that I feel like this work can be tiring. This work can be difficult. And right now, we're just, everybody I know is at level 10 stress all the time. And so consider how you can take care of yourself and each other to be able to keep going, and to know that even small steps are steps. You just can't stop. So wherever you are in this journey, and I think I will always be on a journey and never have completely gotten to the point where I feel like I've got this completely, that you can keep going and don't give up. And if you need a rest, take a rest, but tomorrow is a new day and you can start again.
Mm-hmm.
Love the answer. Alicia, why don't you share your final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts are very, very similar, to really, I mean, one of the things that I'm most looking forward to is hanging out with Rebecca and other school counselors this summer at the American School Counselor Association conference, Counseling Association conference. Because I feel like our community of school counselors and the people who we have sort of pulled into our village are people who I'm always excited to see, and they keep me nourished and they keep me energized and they keep me thinking always about this work and how I can do it differently, better. And so I just encourage educators and school counselors in particular, make sure you have your village, make sure you have those people who you can text on a Sunday night and say, girl, guess what happened? Because Rebecca and I do that all the time. Laura and I do that all the time. And so it really helps fuel you to continue the work.
All right. This has been a very, very, very thought-provoking conversation. And again, you two are very valued, and just the support that you've been receiving from being on the show, and your friends that are chiming in. Laura Ross says, see y'all in Austin. Can't wait.
See you
Yes,
there.
yes, yes. So good for you. Now, if we have folks that want to connect with you online, what's the best way to reach you, Rebecca?
For me, all of my things are Counselor Up. That's what my blog title is. It's, when you pick a name, it sticks with you forever, but that's what we are. So it's sort of like manning up, like I'm going to man up, but you're going to Counselor Up. So I'm at Counselor Up on Twitter, on Instagram. Twitter is definitely the best. I'm the most likely to notice it. Mm-hmm. Let's just be real. Or you can check out counselorup.com.
Nice, nice, nice. And what about you, Alicia?
Same. I'm on Twitter probably a little bit too much. So you can find me there, especially for our school counselor chats that I think are like every third Wednesday or something like that. But Twitter, you can find me Thursday. Is it on Thursdays? I don't know. I just wait to find the hashtag and then I just follow the hashtag. It's hashtag SC for school counselor chat, CHAT. And I'm on Twitter at always _Ogs, OGES. Fun fact, my friend from middle school used to call me Ogs because she sometimes called me Oglesby, sometimes just said Ogs. So
I have never put together that is from Oglesby.
It's from, yeah.
Like OG.
Oh.
Like, and I was like, oh, always OG.
I could be an OG.
She could be OG. We don't know her background.
I know. You never know. I got all the secrets.
That is cracking me up. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
It's been a pleasure. It's an honor actually to have the two of you on. I just popped in the bottom of the screen the title of your book, Interrupting Racism, Equity, and Social Justice in School Counseling. That is available. I see it here right on Amazon. I popped the link in there earlier as well. So if you haven't grabbed the book, please make sure that you do so. Alicia, Rebecca, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So it's been really a great opportunity to be able to speak with them, Rebecca and Alicia. It's a great experience. What I would say, and let me give them a hand clap. Good work, good stuff. I always enjoy doing this. These live streams, it's fun. But here's the thing, and I love that we talked about the idea of getting rid of the gatekeeper process. I think that is very, very important. To me, 2022, the fact that is still a policy in a lot of schools in order for kids to get into gifted and talented, the honors courses, to get into all these advanced, quote unquote, advanced courses. And often when I see a lot of people that are doing these recommendations, it's their favorite students or the A students. And that leaves a lot of kids who aren't getting those opportunities. And then on the other side, we have a lot of students where that policy may not exist. However, they're not being educated to or encouraged to or know about these type of courses that are available or these classes or whatnot and the benefits of these classes. So I think we need to also make sure that we're doing that as well. I cannot forget again, one more time, I'm going to congratulate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson for this historic event today. I'm very happy for that to happen. Now, every Thursday we go live, so if you have not subscribed to the channel, please make sure that you do so that you can be notified. We're also on Facebook live streaming as well. I want to give a quick plug to myself real quick because I'm very proud of this book. So if you haven't already pre-ordered the Leading Equity book, Becoming an Advocate for All Students, please make sure you get that. That is going to be mailed to your house. You will receive it July 20th, 2022. So just a couple months away. That is available on Amazon as well. So make sure that you pick that up or at least pre-order it as well. Now, I'm going to close things out as always. Please remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, keep moving. Let's continue to be a voice in leading equity.